Holy water hit Serenia Vale's wrist and boiled to steam. Every torch knelt, and the Alpha King turned like a predator sensing blood. Calith Dravarin crossed the hall without a word, his burned palm closing over hers as iron wards woke underfoot. "What are you?" he breathed. Then the bell screamed, and a voice from the dark answered, "Daughter." What if your secret could end the Alpha King's reign, or save his soul? Comment your choice below, and before fate calls again, subscribe to the Kingdom of Stories. The morning began like all others, breath, routine, and denial. Serenia rose before the bells, her every motion measured to the rhythm of survival. The kitchens of Eravale pulsed with noise, pots clashing, knives ringing, the hiss of oil meeting flame. To the others, she was just another servant among hundreds. To herself, she was a fugitive from the heavens. Then came the horn, a single low call that made the air itself tremble. From the upper halls, a voice rang out, cold and breathless. "The High King has returned, 3 days early from the Redwood Wars." The name cut through her like lightning through still water. King Calith Dravarin, the wolf-born sovereign, the Alpha whose senses could strip the truth from silence itself, the man who could scent deceit from across a battlefield, and who would kill what he could not understand. Serenia's hands faltered over the dough. A spark of silver rippled beneath her wrist before she smothered it beneath flour. For a heartbeat, the ovens hissed too loudly. The air stilled, listening. She told herself it was fear. But deep down, something older stirred. Recognition without reason, destiny without mercy. The great doors opened. Wind swept through the kitchen, carrying the scent of rain, steel, and smoke. And then he entered. Calith Dravarin, the Alpha King of Eon's blood. Eyes like a storm remembering fire, voice heavy with centuries. His mere presence bent the room toward silence. Even the flames dimmed as if paying respect to their master. He did not speak, he simply looked. And when his gaze found her, the maid no one ever saw, the bond between concealment and consequence shattered. For the first time in 10 years, Serenia felt her blood awaken. The pulse beneath her skin throbbed with forbidden light. Her curse, her truth, her divinity, all clawed for air. Across the hall someone whispered, "By dawn, one will command the fire, and the other will be consumed by it." The words crawled through her bones like prophecy. Calith's gaze didn't waver. He stepped closer, quiet, deliberate, dangerous, until the space between them trembled. In that silence, the maid's disguise began to die, and the world, for a single heartbeat, forgot to breathe. The silence after his arrival felt alive. Every candle trembled, every servant forgot how to move. Serenia stood frozen among the cooks, her pulse thrumming in her throat as Calith Dravarin, the Alpha King of Eravale, crossed the threshold. Rain streaked his armor. The scent of storm and blood clung to him like a crown. The wolves that flanked him lowered their heads, but did not bow. Power rolled off him in waves. Not loud, not boastful, but absolute. He stopped at the center of the great hall, and for the first time in 10 years, the palace itself seemed to inhale. The heralds began to chant his name. Calith of the Iron Line, Lord of Fang and Flame, Keeper of Oaths broken and kept. Yet their words faded beneath a deeper hum that rippled through the walls. Magic recognized its master. Serenia felt the pull in her bones, a current rising against the years she had spent trying to stay invisible. She bowed her head, but her traitor heartbeat thudded loud enough for the gods to hear. The feast that followed was a storm in motion. Torches flared, nobles laughed too loudly, terrified of silence. The Alpha King sat at the head of the table, his back to the carved window where lightning framed him like a weapon forged of light. He had not spoken a word since entering. He did not need to. The air obeyed him. Serenia carried the wine. It was not her duty. She was a scullion, meant to stay behind the curtains, but the chief steward had barked, "You, quiet one, serve the king. He dislikes chatter." She had obeyed. Obedience was safety's disguise. She moved among the courtiers, keeping her gaze on the floor. The goblet trembled in her hand, the ruby liquid shivering as if sensing her fear. When she reached him, she dared one glance. One. The world stopped moving. His eyes, molten grey, rimmed in the faintest ring of gold, lifted to hers. No human eyes could look like that. They were ancient, assessing, and unbearably alive. Something unseen cracked open between them, invisible but fierce, a bond as old as the first fire. It was not attraction, not yet. It was recognition. Predator meeting its mirrored prey. The wolves at his feet whimpered. The torches bent their flames toward her. Serenia forced her hand steady, pouring the wine in silence. Calith's gaze did not leave her. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to music only he could hear. When she turned to retreat, his voice, deep, deliberate, brushed the back of her mind like heat. "What are you hiding, little shadow?" The words were soft enough that only she heard them, yet the weight behind them made her knees weaken. She did not answer. She simply bowed lower and fled the hall, her skirts whispering like smoke. Up on the dais, High Priestess Seraphine Vera watched. The king's return had unsettled her, but what she saw unsettled her more. The way the Alpha's eyes had caught on a servant like a snare. Seraphine's rings, carved from consecrated iron, burned cold against her skin. A maid who drew the wolf's attention without speaking. That was not chance, that was scent. She leaned toward her attendant, voice low. "Find that girl. I want her name, her lineage, and the last 10 years of her life." The attendant bowed, vanishing into the servants' passage. Seraphine smiled. A blade smile. If she is what I think she is, the gods have finally delivered proof that the old blood still walks. Meanwhile, Serenia ran. Past the kitchens, past the echoing stair, until she reached the quiet of the scullery. There she pressed her palm to the nearest wall and whispered the old words, the ones she had promised never to speak again. The light beneath her skin dimmed reluctantly. Stay still, she begged herself. He cannot see what isn't burning. But the air around her still vibrated faintly, like the aftersound of thunder. His presence lingered, not as scent, but as awareness, an invisible tether drawn tight. In the great hall above, Calith still sat unmoving. The feast blurred around him, laughter, music, the scrape of knives, all distant noise. His mind kept returning to that single moment, the maid's gaze, the tremor of the air, the scent of rain turning to metal. He reached for his goblet, but the wine had cooled to frost. His magic had reacted. That had not happened in a decade. A whisper slipped through him, half memory, half instinct. The ether still lives. He rose abruptly, ignoring the startled court, and strode toward the corridor she had fled. Seraphine watched him go, her smile tightening. So the wolf had caught a scent after all. In the corridor's shadows, Serenia clutched her chest as footsteps approached. Heavy, measured, inevitable. Her curse stirred, desperate to flee or to reveal itself, and from beyond the door came the sound of the Alpha King's voice, low, amused, and certain. "Little shadow, the palace just woke up. Tell me, was it you who stirred it?" "Absolutely." Below is a single, fused confrontation scene that replaces your current chapters 3 to 4, preserving canon names and tone, while tightening pacing and spiking stakes. It begins immediately after Chapter 2 and ends with the same public vow, only now it lands like a hammer. Rain threaded the stained glass like falling needles, each drop stitching night to stone. The chapel smelled of wet iron and saints, whose mouths had been carved shut. Candles guttered in rings along the floor, 13 circles of consecrated flame, while High Priestess Seraphine Vera laid iron dust across the flagstones and whispered to the god that fed on fear. "Wake," she breathed. "Show me where the light is hiding." The dust stirred. A glyph bloomed, faint, silver, not in the sanctuary, beyond it. Seraphine's gaze slid to the service passage that tunneled toward the laundry cisterns, a servants' corridor. Somewhere within the walls, water shivered. Footsteps entered the chapel, soft, barefoot, belonging to no pilgrim. Seraphine did not turn. "Your Majesty." Caliph Dravarin stopped 3 paces behind her. The Alpha King's breathing was steady, but the air around him had that strange, dense quality of a storm refusing to break. His voice arrived without ceremony. "You've salted my walls," he said. "Shall I assume a plague or a hunt?" Seraphine smiled into the candles. "Blessings. Iron scours what shadow cannot." "Blessings leave burns," he said, and moved closer. The nearest flame curved towards him, like a creature sniffing a remembered master. "And your blessings follow a scent only you claim to know." She turned then, her rings flashing. "You feel it too." He said nothing, but the torches bowed, just slightly. From the passage, a soft splash. Seraphine's head snapped toward it. The iron dust glyphs flared brighter, then brighter still, as if something unseen had leaned too near. Calith's gaze slid to the corridor. The world pulled taut between them. "Call her," Seraphine said, "or I will." "I command my people," Calith replied, "not your superstition." A second splash, smaller, a caught breath against water. "Little shadow," he said quietly, not raising his voice at all. "Come out." The corridor exhaled steam. Serenia Vale stepped into view with her hands damp and gloved, eyes like a storm that had learned to wear a human face. Behind her, the laundry vat steamed without heat. The chapel's candles trembled. Seraphine's smile was a blade. "Show your wrists, girl." Serenia did not move. She kept her gaze on the floor. "My wrists are clean, Mother Priestess." "Of course," Seraphine replied gently, retrieving a strip of linen already soaking in holy water. "Let's make them cleaner." Calith shifted between them. "You'll do nothing without my word." Seraphine tilted her chin. "And if your word protects blasphemy—" He held her stare, then stepped aside, not yielding, but choosing where to stand. His voice found Serenia and no one else. "Trust me." Serenia swallowed. 10 years of hiding sat on her tongue like broken glass. She pulled off one glove. Silver pulsed beneath her skin, so faint it might have been candle trick. Seraphine's eyes widened. She pressed the wet linen to Serenia's wrist. The holy water boiled. Steam leapt. Every candle bowed flat, as if kneeling. A hiss tore through the chapel, and the iron glyphs erupted in molten script along the floor. Calith caught Serenia's forearm before she flinched away. The steam kissed his palm and branded it with curling, luminous runes. He did not let go. "Enough." Seraphine's voice rose, exultant, unholy. "Interpret again," Calith said, low, as smoke curled from his skin. The chapel smelled of rain on a forge. His burned palm glowed with the same pattern that flickered under Serenia's wrist, the marks twinning as if a mirror had found its other side. The iron circles around them woke, one after another, flames blooming into rings that linked, then locked, forming a sigilled net across the floor. Lines of light shot toward the service passage, ceiling drains, thresholds, even the hairline gaps between stones. The chapel itself became a trap. Seraphine raised both hands. "By the iron." Her prayer cut off. Calith had stepped forward, crowding the space where piety pretended to be courage. His shadow swallowed hers. "You will not brand my people in my house," he said. Something in the way he said house made the candles hesitate. Seraphine's gaze slid to Serenia, sweat beading at the maid's temple, breath held too long. The priestess softened her tone, mother-sweet and viper-sure. "Child, truth purifies pain. Admit what you are and the god may spare you." Serenia lifted her head. For the first time, she let herself look fully at the Alpha. "I stirred only the water," she whispered. The nearest vat answered. Its surface went perfectly still, then turned to glass. In that mirror, For a heartbeat, her reflection changed. Wings like cut light unfurled and folded again, gone so quickly one might call it grief. Seraphine saw it. She reeled back as if the image had struck her. Delight and terror warred in her face. Ethereal, she breathed, the old blood. Calith's burned palm ached like memory. He closed his fingers, then opened them, and when he spoke, it was not to Seraphine at all. "Whatever you are," he said to Serenia, voice roughening, "the palace woke when I entered." The words landed like a vow, unmasking itself. Seraphine lunged for the altar, slamming her iron staff against the stone. The glyphs surged, rings of light constricted, racing toward Serenia's ankles like snakes. The linen strip, still clinging to her skin, flared, searing human disguise. Heat raced up her arm. She gasped. Silver. A wing shadow rippled across the wall. Calith moved faster than fear. He stepped into the tightening circle and ground a sigil under his heel. Fire climbed his leg and bit bone. He didn't stop. With his burned hand, he seized the iron staff mid-arc. "Your god answers iron," he said through his teeth. "Mine answers blood." He crushed the staff against his palm. The runes branded deeper, then inverted. Iron light bending, then fracturing, then going out like a star that had decided to be a dawn instead. Silence dropped, taut as a garrote. Seraphine stared at his hand, at the impossible reversal of her holy script. For the first time, she looked afraid. "What are you?" "A crowned mistake," he said, almost smiling, and let the staff fall. From the nave doors, armor clattered, soldiers and stewards drawn by the disturbance. Faces piled into the thresholds like water finding a break. Whispers swelled. The wolves at Calith's heels had arrived without sound, eyes pale as winter. Seraphine recovered her voice and made certain the hall heard it. "Your Majesty shields a heretic in the temple." The crowd inhaled. The chapel's old saints seemed to lean, listening. Calith did not glance at them. He looked only at Serenia, who stood with one glove off, and a decade of fear slipping from her mouth like smoke. Her eyes were not pleading. They were waiting to learn whether the world would end softly or with teeth. He set himself between her and the iron rings that hadn't died, and lifted his burned hand for all to witness, runes blazing like a second heartbeat. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying in that effortless way power has when it has decided to be gentle or to kill, "is under my command." The soldiers froze. The wolves lay down. The crowd, half court, half rumor, did not dare breathe. Seraphine laughed once, brittle as a cracked chalice, possession disguised as mercy. Calith turned at last to the hall. The rain outside intensified, drumming the colored glass until the saints seemed to bleed. "Write this in your ledgers," he said. "Mercy is not possession. Mercy is law." He lowered his burned hand and stepped back to Serenia's side. For a moment, they shared the same air like a single lung the palace had waited a decade to remember. Somewhere far above, a bell began to toll, a thin, warning sound that cut the rain like wire. Seraphine's eyes shone with a terrible joy. "Then law will answer you." The iron rings under the floor flickered, once, twice, like a pulse failing. The chapel's great doors blew inward. Wind extinguished half the candles, and from that gusting dark, a voice entered that did not belong to mortals. "Daughter." The bell stuttered. The torches bowed again. Serenia's face went bloodless. Calith's jaw hardened. Seraphine smiled like a knife finding meat, and the god in the iron woke for real. Thunder rolled across the night like a restless god. Rain clawed the glass towers of Eravale, turning the palace spires into molten silver. Inside, firelight guttered low, shadows moving like restless wolves along the walls. In the king's private quarters, Calith Dravarin stood alone. His burned hand throbbed where the holy water had kissed him, the skin still branded with faint runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. He stared at it, not with pain, but recognition. The flame chose, he had told her. But now, alone with the storm, he wondered, what had it chosen him for? The door creaked softly behind him. He didn't turn. You shouldn't be here, Serenia Vale. She stepped into the light anyway, the hood of her cloak dripping rain. I came to tend your wound. He almost smiled. You're bold for someone half the court calls cursed. Her gaze didn't waver. And you're reckless for someone who just declared a maid under royal command. Caliph turned then, the flicker of flame caught in his eyes. No one commands you, he said quietly. Not even me. She approached the table where bandages and salve lay untouched. When she reached for his hand, the air changed. Dense, electric, heavy with something neither of them dared name. Her fingers brushed his wrist. The burn flared gold beneath her touch, not in pain, but in resonance. The mark answering hers. The sigils on his skin shimmered, rearranging themselves into a mirrored pattern that matched the faint light pulsing beneath her gloves. They both froze. His breath caught. Hers stopped. What are you? He whispered. Serenia hesitated. The lie balanced on her tongue for one last time. Then she let it die. I am ethereal, she said softly, one of the old ones. What your kind calls a fallen star. Caliph's eyes darkened, not in hatred but in grief. I thought your kind perished when the heavens sealed. Some of us hid, she said. Some of us wore human skin. I wore mine too long. The curse was the price. He studied her face. Not beauty, but truth. The kind that unsettled, the kind that remembered light. What curse, he asked, that I can never return to the stars unless I am seen for what I am. Yet to be seen is death. Caliph looked down at his hand again, at the mark that bound them now. Then death has already seen you. She smiled faintly. And still you stand. He moved to the window, looking out over the storm. When I was born, he said quietly, my mother called me divine. The priests called me a mistake. My father was human. My mother, wolf-born of the moonline. The gods cursed me to bear both, man and beast, never belonging to either. Serenia's voice softened. So you understand. He nodded. Duality is a crown made of thorns. A flash of lightning lit the chamber. For a heartbeat, their shadows merged on the wall, like one body with two hearts. Tell me, he murmured, when you hide, do you ever feel half alive? All the time, she said. Silence stretched, long, aching, human. He reached toward her, but stopped short, as if afraid to disturb what they'd become. I should send you away, he said finally. You endanger us both. Then why don't you? Caliph looked at her, the rain behind him like a curtain of light. Because for the first time in 10 years, the palace feels alive again. Outside, hidden beyond the balcony, High Priestess Seraphine watched through the glass rain. Her cloak was soaked, her eyes alight with victory. Through a prism of storm water, she saw the glow of their joined hands. The prophecy she had buried in the iron codex stirred in her mind. When light weds the beast, the mother of shadows will rise again. She whispered to her messenger raven, voice like poison silk. Fly to the northern ruins, tell Morgan her daughter is found. The bird took flight, black wings slicing the rain. Lightning cracked across the sky as Seraphine's words echoed into the storm. The mother will come for what is hers. And far beyond the palace walls, deep in the forests of the Forgotten Vale, something ancient stirred, whispering a single word through fanged mist, daughter. The storm did not end with dawn. It only grew quieter, like a predator crouching before the strike. Mist swirled above the Forgotten Vale, where light dared not linger. There, among twisted trees slick with dew, a figure stirred from centuries of slumber. Her hair was black as eclipse glass. Her skin shimmered faintly, like moonlight filtered through smoke. When she opened her eyes, they burned silver blue, the color of ethereal flame long extinguished from the world. Morgan Vale. once a guardian of creation, now the devourer of it. She had been mother to only one child, a daughter she cursed to hide among mortals the night the heavens fell. Now, as her raven circled overhead, Morgan smiled, a thin, fractured thing. "So," she whispered to the mist, "my blood still lives in chains." The forest trembled. Around her, shadows peeled themselves from the trees, shapeless beasts formed of mist and regret. They bowed low as she rose from the moss. "Come," she said, her voice carrying through roots and bone alike. "It is time the palace remembers its sins." Serenia woke gasping, her body slick with cold sweat and silver light. She had dreamed again, the same nightmare that haunted her since childhood, a mother's voice calling her name in a language older than stars, a sky splitting apart, a promise whispered in flame. "Hide, child of light, or the world will burn." Now that voice had returned, no longer memory, but presence. She sat up, heart pounding, eyes drawn to the balcony. Far in the distance, beyond the city's wall, a faint glow pulsed at the edge of the forest. Not fire, something darker, something summoning. Caliph found her there moments later, wrapped in her cloak, staring toward the horizon. "The sentries report movement in the vale," he said, "something unnatural." "It's her," Serenia whispered. "Who?" "My mother." He froze. "You said she was gone." "I said she was lost," Serenia corrected. "Not gone. She consumed the light of her kin to live. The hunger took everything else." Calith's jaw clenched. "Then she comes to claim what remains." Serenia turned to him, eyes wide with fear that was not for herself. "You don't understand. She can feel me, my magic. It's what draws her." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Then we end the call before she reaches these walls." "How?" Calith's expression darkened. "By giving her something stronger to sense." Before she could protest, he raised his hand, pressing his palm over her heart. The mark burned through the layers of fabric, a pulse shared between flame and starlight. His magic met hers in an explosion of gold and white. She gasped, "What are you doing?" "Binding your light to mine," he said, voice tight with strain. "If she wants to claim you, she'll have to face me first." The bond seared into existence, raw, imperfect, holy. Outside, thunder rolled again, but this time it answered them. In the eastern cloister, Seraphine watched the storm gathering beyond the stained glass. Her acolytes knelt behind her, chanting the old wards, but the glass flickered, then cracked, as black wind coiled around the chapel spire. A whisper slid through the fracture. "Faith cannot stop blood, priestess." Seraphine's breath caught. She turned just in time to see the shadow beasts pour over the outer wall. "Sound the bells!" she screamed. "Seal the sanctum!" The first bell never finished its toll. The beast tore through the lower gates like ink spilling across parchment. Soldiers fell before they could raise blades. And at their center walked Morgan, barefoot, radiant, terrible. Within the palace, Caliph drew his sword, a blade forged from the bones of the last fire drake. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Serenia stepped forward instead. "If she's here for me, you can't stop her with steel." He met her gaze, wolf to flame. "I won't let her take you." "You may not have a choice." A crash thundered through the hall, the main door shattering inward. Wind howled through the corridor, scattering embers and dust. And from the wreckage emerged the figure she had feared for a decade. Morgan's eyes locked on hers instantly. "Daughter." The word fell like a prayer and a curse at once. Serenia's hands trembled. "Mother." Caliph stepped between them, sword raised. Morgan's laughter was soft, echoing. "The Alpha King guards my blood. How quaint. Do you even know what you protect?" "She is no one's to claim," Caliph growled. Morgan's expression hardened. "Then she dies as yours." Dark fire erupted from her palms, colliding with Caliph's blade in a spray of sparks that burned the floor black. Serenia screamed as the shockwave hurled them apart. The corridor dissolved into chaos, shadows devouring light, glass raining from the ceiling, iron bells wailing in agony. When the smoke cleared, Morgan stood at the center of the ruin, her shadow beasts forming a circle around her. "Come home, child," she said softly. "You've hidden long enough." Serenya's tears caught the glow of the dying torches. "I can't." "Then burn with them." Morgan raised her hand, and the floor beneath them split open with the roar of an awakening god. Caliph grabbed Serenya's wrist just as the flames surged upward, light and shadow entwined. "Hold on," he shouted over the inferno, "or we both fall." From the rising darkness, Morgan's voice answered, "Fall then, fall to me." And the palace bells screamed as if heaven itself had cracked. The palace of Eravale burned like a dying constellation. Flames climbed its towers in tongues of gold and ash, licking the heavens that once blessed it. The air reeked of molten iron and fear. Beneath the roar of the inferno came another sound, an older one. Chains, waking. Calith's sword clashed against shadow, each strike flaring white, each movement a prayer whispered through grit and blood. But the enemy was endless. Morgan's beasts regenerated from darkness itself. He fought like a creature, cornered by fate, yet every blow he struck bled light instead of death. Serenya knelt beside the cracked marble dais, hands trembling over a fallen guard. The man's armor smoked with black frost. The touch of Morgan's curse. She pressed her palm to his chest. Light flickered through his veins. The curse hissed and broke. Her secret no longer mattered. The disguise she had worn for 10 years unraveled in a single breath. Her wings, iridescent, vast, and terrible, unfurled behind her, scattering dust and embers like stars reborn. Gasps rippled through the hall. Soldiers dropped to their knees. Seraphine, standing by the broken altar, saw it and smiled with vicious relief. "There it is," the priestess whispered, "the heresy unveiled." Seraphine turned toward her acolytes. "Now, activate the seals of the Iron God. Let holy flame purge what shadow could not." The wards burst to life across the floor, lines of molten script etching themselves into marble, forming a circle around Serenya. Caliph saw too late. "Stop!" he shouted, lunging forward. The runes ignited, light exploded upward, chaining Serenya mid-air. She screamed, the sound both divine and human, echoing through the burning hall. Her wings beat once, scattering sparks that struck the ceiling and fell as burning snow. But the seals tightened, feeding on her power. Seraphine's laughter cracked like glass. "An abomination bound by sanctity. The gods will thank me for this." Calith's rage broke its leash. A sound tore from his throat, low, guttural, ancient. The shift came without thought. His body convulsed, bones lengthening, armor splitting. Where a man had stood, a wolf of obsidian fur and silver eyes rose, taller than any soldier, his growl shaking the pillars. The Alpha had returned to his true form. He leapt through the circle of fire, shattering the wards with his weight. Iron brands seared his hide, but he tore through them, teeth bared, claws like curved blades. Seraphine stumbled back, horror dawning in her eyes. You bear the curse too." He pounced. One sweep of his paw sent her sprawling, her staff clattering across the floor. But before he could strike again, Morgan's voice filled the hall. It was not shouted, it simply was, rolling through their bones like thunder, remembering who it was meant to be. "Enough." The flames parted as Morgan stepped through the ruined gates, cloak of shadow trailing like the tail of a comet. Her eyes met Calith's wolf gaze, calm, commanding, cruel. "I gave you a chance to hand her over," she said. "Now I'll take you both." With a flick of her wrist, chains of blackened light burst from the ground, coiling around his limbs. Calith roared, struggling, but the links tightened, glowing with celestial runes. They were not forged by man. They were relics of the gods themselves. Serenya cried out, forcing her burned wings to move. "Mother, stop! He's not your enemy." Morgan's expression softened, almost tender. Then he is yours, and that makes him worse. The chains dragged Caliph to his knees. He snarled, defiant even as blood ran from his mouth. Seraphine rose unsteadily, trembling from fear and awe. "My Queen of Shadow," she breathed, "you promised salvation." Morgan smiled without warmth. Salvation was never meant for mortals. With one wave of her hand, Seraphine's heart stilled mid-beat. She fell like a candle snuffed by its own flame. Serenia screamed as the chain around Caliph's throat pulled tighter. Sparks erupted from her palms. Raw, wild, unfiltered ether. She hurled it at her mother, but Morgan's shadows devoured it whole. "Your light is mine," Morgan said gently. "It always was." Serenia's voice trembled. "No, Mother, it was ours. You just forgot how to share it." Morgan hesitated, just for a breath, and in that breath Caliph spoke. His voice was hoarse, almost broken. "Serenia, if you have to choose to live." The chains yanked him backward. His body hit the marble with a thunderous crack. The marks on Serenia's skin flared brighter, answering his agony with her own. She lifted her face to the burning ceiling, tears searing her cheeks. "Then I choose us." Her wings flared wide, blinding light filling the chamber, swallowing flame and shadow alike. The explosion ripped through the palace, tearing the roof from its pillars. The night above bled with light. As the light faded, Caliph lay motionless, bound in divine chains. Serenia knelt beside him, the last of her strength flickering. From the smoke, Morgan's voice echoed one final promise. "If you will not come home, daughter, then I will unmake the home you chose." And outside, the capital's horizon began to burn. The palace was dying. Its once golden corridors now ran with molten iron, walls breathing smoke like the lungs of a fading god. The heart furnace, the ancient core of Eravale, where the first flame of creation burned, groaned deep beneath the marble foundations. Every strike of thunder above echoed the cracking of stone below. Serenia staggered through the ruins, carrying the weight of two worlds, light and grief both bleeding through her hands. Behind her, Caliph's chains dragged across the floor, each step a war against the divine bindings that held him. His wolf form was gone, replaced by a man wounded beyond mortal measure, eyes dim but unyielding. Above them, Morgan's shadow coiled like smoke from a dying star. "You cannot win," she said softly, her voice echoing from every wall. "Every step you take brings you closer to the flame that will end you." Serenia turned to face her. "Then it ends here." They descended into the oldest part of the palace. Guided by the glow that had once warmed all kingdoms, the first fire. It pulsed now like a heart in pain, its rhythm wild and uneven. The air shimmered with energy too pure for mortals, too corrupted for gods. "This is where your kind began," Morgan said, appearing out of the smoke. "The forge where we shaped light into matter, where I burned away weakness." Serenia faced her mother, trembling, but resolute. "You burned away love. That's all you ever destroyed." Morgan's expression softened for a heartbeat, then fury returned. "Love made us weak." Caliph, leaning on his sword, rasped, "Love made you remember what you were, and that's why you ran from it." Morgan's eyes flashed. "You dare speak of memory, half-breed king?" She raised her hand, and a tendril of shadow lashed toward him, pure hunger given form. Serenia stepped between them. The strike hit her square in the chest. Light exploded outward, shards of radiance scattering through the air. She fell to her knees, hands clutching the wound, silver blood blooming through her fingers like molten stars. Caliph caught her before she collapsed fully. Her voice trembled. "She's tied to the flame. If I burn it out, she goes with it." He looked at her, realization dawning. "You mean to sacrifice yourself?" "I mean to finish what she started," Serenia said weakly. "But differently." Morgan advanced, her form flickering between beauty and ruin. "You will not touch the flame. It is mine." Serenia smiled faintly, pain turning her voice ethereal. No, Mother, it was never yours. It was ours, yours, mine, and his. She pressed her palm to the furnace. The flame roared, alive, aware. It surged up her arm, devouring the last illusion of her human disguise. Her wings erupted in full light, tearing through the ceiling in a blaze of gold. Feathers burned into ash, each one transforming into motes of power that circled her like stars returning to orbit. Morgan screamed, unleashing every shadow she commanded. The darkness struck, but it did not consume. It merged. The light and shadow collided, wrestled, and began to weave into one. A spiral of gold and obsidian, creation and void locked in eternal dance. Caliph, crawling closer, reached for her hand. You can't do this alone. I was never meant to, she whispered. He pressed his burned palm over hers on the furnace. Pain lanced through both, but the fusion stabilized, their energies intertwining, rewriting the laws that had bound gods and mortals for ages. Serenia, he said through clenched teeth, if this kills us— It won't, she interrupted. It will free us. Their joined power surged through the chamber. The chains binding Caliph melted into liquid light. The floor split open, revealing the veins of the world itself, streams of molten creation coursing toward the flame. Above them, Morgan screamed as her shadows tore apart, her body dissolving into mist and sorrow. Her last words came as a whisper swallowed by the blaze. Daughter, forgive me. Then she was gone. The flame consumed everything, the hall, the pillars, the heaven's silence, until only two figures remained within its center, the Alpha and the fallen star, their hands still clasped, their eyes locked. Caliph smiled faintly. We did it. Serenia shook her head, tears of light glimmering. No, Caliph, you did. You chose love in a world that feared it. The fire rose higher, enveloping them. Caliph's final words were a vow spoken into eternity. Then let this love remake the world. The explosion that followed was not destruction, it was birth. Light and shadow fused into one pure color, neither gold nor black, but something the world had never seen. When the palace collapsed, it did not fall in ruin. It ascended, stone turning to crystal, ash to air, fire to song. When the smoke cleared, the palace of Eravale was gone. Only a crater of shining glass remained. In its center, two intertwined symbols glowed faintly, a wolf's eye and a star's wing. The wind whispered through the hollow, carrying their echo. Love is the flame that cannot die. And then silence. Centuries passed, empires rose, fell, and crumbled into the dust from which they had come. Yet at the center of the reborn world, where the palace of Eravale once stood, a new kingdom shimmered, built of glass and light. It was called Ceraloon, the City of Dawn. Every night when the twin moons aligned, the sky would glint with faint silver threads, as if two unseen stars still circled each other, weaving their story across time. The elders whispered that the air itself carried the memory of fire and song, that those who listened closely could still hear the hum of love that once unmade the gods. Apprentices bustled about the atrium, their white robes dusted with ash and spice. At the center table stood a young cook barely past 20, eyes flecked with molten silver, hair the color of midnight smoke. His name was Lyrian Vale. He moved with a rhythm that felt older than his bones. Each motion was instinct, stirring, tasting, breathing, as if guided by hands that were no longer there. Before him sat a vessel of glass shaped like a heart. Inside it, two substances swirled, one bright as dawn, the other dark as eclipsed moonlight. They refused to mix. Lyrian frowned. Balance, he murmured. That's what the old text said. But every attempt ended the same. The elements fought each other, rejecting union, until, frustrated, He whispered a prayer he did not know he remembered. If love is the flame that cannot die, then let it taste of both light and shadow. He reached out with trembling hands, mixing the two streams. This time, instead of clashing, they merged. The room filled with a soft hum, not thunder, not music, but something between heartbeat and hymn. The air grew heavy with scent, sweet smoke, salt, and the faint trace of rain. Students turned in astonishment. The vessel glowed, then cooled, leaving behind a single crystal confection, translucent, radiant, alive. Lirain broke a fragment and tasted it. At once his mind flooded with visions, a woman of wings and fire laughing through tears, a man of wolf's blood holding her hand as worlds burned around them, two hearts beating as one inside a storm of creation. He fell to his knees, eyes wide with awe, and from the edges of his consciousness, two voices whispered, gentle, timeless, intertwined, perfection is silence, but love is sound. When he looked up, the vessel had vanished. In its place, the flame of the furnace flickered once, then steadied, brighter than before. From that day on, the scholars of Seraluni recorded the miracle as the renewal of the flame. They never understood it. They only knew that something sacred had returned to the world, and that every generation born after bore a trace of both wolf and star in their blood. Eyes flecked silver, hearts that burned with both hunger and mercy. No longer alpha or ethereal, but something entirely new. At the edge of the sea, where glass meets tide, a monument stands. Two intertwined forms sculpted from obsidian and crystal. Every dawn, light passes through them and scatters into 1,000 colors across the waves. Fishermen claim that when the wind shifts, they hear a voice carried through the spray, low, warm, unending. The alpha still burns for his sun, and the sea answers, whispering back, and the sun still rises for her wolf. The flame that remade the world flickers on, not in temples nor in kings, but in every heart that dares to love what the gods forbid. The alpha still burns for his sun,